Hi, I'm Kelly Barner, and thank you for joining me for this week's Supplier Diversity Discussions video. Now, today I have an excerpt of an interview I did with a good friend and colleague, Kate Vitasek. And the reason that I brought Kate Vitasek in is not necessarily because she's such an expert in supplier diversity, but what she is an expert in is what she calls vested relationships. Now, there's a whole series of books associated with the vested program, and I highly recommend that you check them out and consider picking one up. But really, the core of the vested idea is that if you have a corporation and a supplier, and they have a true vested relationship, then everything that they do together is focused on outcomes. And so what I took this opportunity to ask Kate, extending sort of this outcome-based relationship idea to supplier diversity, is what kind of a process procurement or strategic sourcing needs to go through if the goal at the end of the day is a truly mutually beneficial relationship. So that's what I had asked Kate. What do we need to do in the procurement process to ensure that we're finding suppliers and setting the groundwork right from the very beginning to actually have collaborative, productive relationships?
RFP. So this is where we had a whole white paper, two white papers and two case studies around what we call an RF partner. So you say you want a strategic partner, you can't use a traditional RFP process because a RFP process says, here's what I want, give me a price for what I want, and maybe there's some value add and I've got best value calculation in there. But that's not a partner in cultural fit, and that's not the solution and the iterative thing. So we not only need to have a different contracting process, we need to have a different bid process. We need to have a different, maybe you want to have the exact same compliance. But when you look at all of your suppliers and you go, if everybody has to have X amount of insurance, and proportionally that's very out of whack for a smaller, is the risk of that smaller supplier really that big?
Right.
So maybe they need X insurance. Maybe they need X. So I almost think of it as, and in the book Strategic Sourcing and Economy, I have a one pager, the whole book, and then we summarize, and it's like these swim lanes. So you've got the different business models, and you're like, you know what, if you're a basic provider, do you even need insurance? Like, I don't care. Right? If you're here, and then if you are a special preferred supplier, but you're smaller, I may need to augment that, right? And so we're not thinking holistically, we're thinking about best practiced, and what is best practiced and streamlined and amazing for the buyer may be absolutely sucky and not best fit for the bigger picture.
Right. Now, there are two things in what Kate said that I want to call out and maybe discuss a little bit more. The first one is that if you're truly looking for either an officially vested relationship or simply a more collaborative relationship with your suppliers, the traditional RFP process is probably not the way to get there. Now, that doesn't mean you can't use an RFP. They have an important place to play in the procurement toolkit. But you may have to change the way you approach it. You may have to consider different kinds of information. There may need to be more rounds or more back and forth. But the fact of the matter is, if you're looking for a different type of commercial relationship, you need to have a different type of evaluation and selection process leading up to it. The second thing she pointed out that I think is very important is this idea that procurement can be overly focused on what is best for achieving our objectives without necessarily knowing what's actually going on for the supplier that we claim to have a relationship with. Now, that seems very obvious, but I would ask you to actually think about how that works in your personal life. If somebody's incredibly happy and there's a friend in this relationship that is maybe not so happy, if they're not both getting what they need from that relationship, then it's not a good relationship. So if procurement is overly focused on saying, yes, we have tight relationships or collaborative relationships with our suppliers, but the supplier doesn't feel that same sentiment in return, that's going to be a severely limiting factor. And it actually means that in reality, we don't have the relationship that we think we do. Now, bringing this back to supplier diversity, if the goal is for us to actually build these value-oriented relationships with diverse-owned businesses, develop them over time, and ensure that we're working with them as partners to make our supply chains more inclusive, don't you think we ought to make sure that the relationship is working out as well for them as it is for us? Thank you so much for joining me for this portion of the interview and to explore the ideas around the kind of relationships we need to have to get the best value out of supplier diversity.